5 years ago, my fiancé's childhood sweetheart was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He resolutely abandoned our wedding and went to accompany her on a trip around the world to fulfill her dying wish. Now, Demi has miraculously recovered, and he has returned. He brought Demi home and saw that I was still there, thinking that I had been waiting for him to return. He graciously allowed me to stay. Demi has just overcome her illness and is still feeling vulnerable. I allow you to stay here and take care of her. I paused for a moment and replied softly, I'm already married. I don't need your permission to stay here. He looked at me with disdain, don't joke around. Everyone knows you're head over heels for me. Later, when he saw my marriage certificate, his face turned pale, you're clearly my wife. The morning sun filled the courtyard. I was watering the roses in the yard. Suddenly, I heard a familiar yet unfamiliar voice behind me. Bailey, I didn't expect you to still be at my house. I stopped watering and slowly turned around. David held Demi's hand and stood side by side not far away. After 5 years apart, the look in his eyes was not only surprise but also a sense of pride that was hard to put into words. It seems like you've been waiting for me to come back these past 5 years. I put down the kettle and wiped the water droplets from my hands. David hugged Demi tightly, his eyes brimming with pride. Demi's illness is finally cured. We've traveled the world for 5 years and fulfilled all her wishes. He looked at Demi with deep affection, then turned his gaze to me. She's the only one I've ever loved in my entire life. I looked up, met his gaze, and spoke calmly. Congratulations to you both, but I'm already married. David paused for a second upon hearing this, then burst into laughter. Don't pretend, Bailey. Everyone knows you're head over heels for me. You've been sitting in this empty house for 5 years, just waiting for me to come back, haven't you? His tone was arrogant, as if he were the master of the house. Demi had just overcome her illness and was still weak and fragile. I will allow you to continue staying here, as you can take care of her. Consider it compensation for staying at my place for 5 years. This is David's special favor. I shook my head and calmly met his gaze. I'm staying here. I don't need your permission. A flash of anger crossed his face, followed by a smug expression. Don't forget, we didn't even have a wedding back then, and we never got married. You've been living in my house for 5 years, but to be honest, you're nothing. You're just an outsider. In the sunlight, his silhouette was still handsome, but at that moment, he was unbearably glaring in my eyes. 5 years is enough time for a person to see the true face of another. 5 years ago, I stood in a luxurious banquet hall wearing a wedding dress, filled with joy as I waited for my groom. However, David suddenly strode onto the stage, grabbed the microphone, and said, I'm sorry everyone, today's wedding has been cancelled. Demi has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I must be by her side as she goes through her final days. All eyes were on me. Sympathy, pity, shock, and gawking stares pierced my heart like 1,000 needles. In that moment, my world collapsed. Her memories were interrupted by Demi's soft voice. She lowered her eyelids at the right moment, her shoulders trembling slightly. Her voice was light and airy, but every word pierced his heart. David, let's just go. After all, Miss Bailey has been living here all these years. It's too much to suddenly show up and disturb her. She swayed slightly and leaned weakly against David. Only I knew the calculation and satisfaction hidden beneath her lowered eyelashes. David immediately wrapped his arms around her waist as if protecting a priceless treasure. His face was filled with tension and concern. Demi, don't say that. Your health is more important. I won't let you suffer like this again. Let's go home and you can rest. After calming Demi down, he turned his head, and the warmth on his face vanished instantly, replaced by anger. You've lived in my house for 5 years. Everything you ate and wore was paid for by my family. Demi was suffering outside, fighting her illness, he asked me harshly. Bailey, has your conscience been eaten by a dog? I took a deep breath, suppressed the emotions welling up inside me, and tried to explain. David, get this straight. Enough. He interrupted me roughly. I allowed you to stay so you could take care of Demi and make up for the past 5 years. Since you don't know a good thing when you see it, get out of our house right now. Now. David, you have no right to make me leave. I raised my head and spoke firmly. At that moment, the butler, Uncle Tom, heard the sound and came out. Ah, it's David who's back. Then Uncle Tom turned to me respectfully and said, "Ma'am, the gentleman called and said he would be back half an hour early. He's already on his way." Upon hearing this, my tense body finally relaxed. Good, now that Gavin is back, there's no need to waste my breath on this hypocritical couple. David seemed not to hear us and ordered Uncle Tom from above. "Uncle Tom, clear out the master bedroom on the first floor. Demi is weak and climbing stairs is too much for her." Uncle Tom looked troubled. "David, that room has been converted into Andrew's game room. It's filled with his toys and books, so it's not really suitable for someone to stay in." David furrowed his brows, a look of confusion in his eyes. "When did I get a nephew?" Uncle Tom's eyes were filled with love. "Andrew is 4.5 years old, smart and clever, and loves drawing and storytelling. You'll definitely like him when you meet him." David listened and looked enlightened. "I get it. Mom and Dad must have thought I wasn't home, so they adopted a child to keep themselves entertained." I looked at him talking to himself and sighed silently. 5 years had passed, and he still lived in his own world, never caring about other people's feelings or lives. "David, you've got it all wrong," Uncle Tom hurriedly explained. "Andrew is your older brother's biological son." David burst out laughing upon hearing this, his eyes filled with disbelief. "My brother got married and had a child? Didn't he say he would work hard until he was 40 before considering his personal life? It's like the sun is rising in the west. I'd like to see what kind of woman could tame my cold-faced brother." Uncle Tom looked at me hesitantly, his eyes full of questions. I nodded slightly, motioning for him to continue. Uncle Tom took a deep breath. "David, Miss Bailey is your sister-in-law. She and David have been married for over 4 years." David's smile froze instantly. 5 years ago, on that rainy night, when all the guests had left and I was standing alone in the empty banquet hall. It was Gavin. He handed me a clean handkerchief and said in a low, gentle voice, "I'll walk you home." From then on, Gavin began to appear frequently in my life. He never mentioned David, but just quietly stayed by my side and helped me get through the darkest time of my life. He would bring me a steaming hot midnight snack when I worked late into the night, carefully remember the blooming season of every flower I liked, and on my birthday, give me the design studio of my dreams. Love arrived quietly and unexpectedly. Soon, we held a simple and warm wedding, without any grand pomp and circumstance, attended only by our closest family and friends, who witnessed our happiness. David's body stiffened, and his Adam's apple rolled up and down with difficulty. After a long time, he regained his voice and burst into a shrill laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. How could my brother marry you? He's always had his sights set on someone out of his league. How could he possibly be interested in an ordinary woman like you? Uncle Tom, have you been bought off by her? She must have deliberately gotten close to my brother while I was away for the past few years, trying to use him to climb the social ladder." Uncle Tom wiped the sweat from his forehead. "David, Miss Bailey is really your sister-in-law. She and Gavin are very much in love, and Andrew is almost ready for kindergarten." David sounded like he had heard a fairy tale. He snorted and pointed at me with his fingertip. "You? My sister-in-law?" He turned to Uncle Tom, his tone threatening. "Uncle Tom, have you gone senile or has she put you under a spell? We haven't seen her in 5 years. And she's become quite skilled, even buying you off?" Looking at him so convinced that he was being deceived, I found it somewhat amusing. Who was Gavin? He was the CEO of the Lou Group, a recognized business genius in the industry. Before the age of 30, he successfully led his company into the international market, established his own technology brand, and won numerous awards. In the Lou family, apart from his father, who dares to go against his decisions? And he never relied on his family's resources, earning everyone's respect through his own abilities. He would allow me to take advantage of the situation to advance my career? That's just a pipe dream. In the early days of our marriage, I always thought that Gavin had married me out of sympathy and a sense of responsibility. I even secretly packed my bags, planning to ask for a divorce once the storm had passed. That day, just as I dragged my suitcase to the door, he stood there holding a large bouquet of sunflowers, his voice tinged with a hint of unmistakable hurt. "Why are you leaving? I didn't marry you out of pity. I married you because I truly love you." At that moment, I saw the sincerity and tenderness in his eyes, like a ray of light illuminating all my anxieties. From that day on, I never doubted our marriage again. Over the past 5 years, I have found true love, gained a beloved son named Andrew, and built a career I am passionate about. My life is now 100 times more fulfilling and happier than it ever was before. I shook my head, trying to keep my voice calm. "David, it's been 5 years. Things have changed. You're thinking too much." Demi crossed her arms across her chest and looked down on her sister with contempt. "Sister, you're really good at playing mind games. You replaced all the other servants and bribed the old butler. You've been plotting this all along, haven't you?" Before she could finish, I poured the water from the cup in my hand onto her face and said, "Say that again." David was instantly furious. "Bailey, I was actually going to give you $2 million as compensation so you'd know better than to stay in this house. It seems I was too kind. You've already taken advantage of everything. For the past 5 years, you've occupied the position of wife, enjoying a life of luxury and wealth, while Demi has had to endure illness and be tortured by you here. Now, I order you to kneel down immediately and apologize to Demi." Uncle Tom was so frightened that his face turned pale. He hurried forward to stop him. "You can't do that, David. Miss Bailey is your sister-in-law, an elder. How can you let her kneel? If your father finds out." I slowly got up and walked forward, my face expressionless. A hint of smugness flashed across Demi's eyes, and she couldn't help but smile, even taking a step forward and striking a forgiving pose, ready to accept my apology. I walked up to her, and her smile grew even brighter. But I ignored her and crouched down, spreading my arms wide to catch Andrew as he came running down the garden path. "Mom." Andrew was covered in dirt, clutching a fluttering butterfly in his hand, and excitedly threw himself into my arms. "Mom, look. I caught a butterfly." Andrew carefully opened his palm, and a beautiful blue butterfly was fluttering its wings in his hand. I gently stroked his little head. "Great job catching such a beautiful butterfly. But the little butterfly also needs to go home to find its mother. Let's let it go, shall we?" Andrew nodded wisely, watching the butterfly fly away before lifting his little face again. David stared at the scene in disbelief, his expression shifting from shock to disbelief. He stared at Andrew's face, his voice trembling. "Bailey, where did you get this child? You promised me you'd only have children with me for the rest of your life." I bent down and picked up Andrew, feeling only a sense of helplessness and ridicule. 5 years had passed, and he was still living in his own fantasy world, thinking that the whole world revolved around him. Demi rolled her eyes and said in a weak voice, but with obvious sarcasm, "David, don't be angry. But look at this child, his eyebrows and eyes really do look a bit like you when you were little. Could it be that Miss Sue found someone outside to impersonate you?" Before she could finish, Andrew furrowed his little brow and hugged my neck tightly. "Mom, this lady talks so weird. Is she a bad person?" Children speak without reservation, but his words hit a nerve with certain people. Demi's face turned red in an instant. I held back a smile and gently patted Andrew on the back. "Don't say that. They're guests." Andrew wriggled out of my embrace and stood stubbornly in front of me, his little hands on his hips. "You're not allowed to bully my mom. I'll protect her." David's face turned ashen, and he roared, "Shut up, you little bastard. Who gave you permission to speak?" The words "little bastard" felt like poison needles piercing my heart. I clenched my fists tightly, struggling to resist the urge to rush forward and slap him. I crouched down and whispered to Andrew, "Sweetheart, would you go wash your hands with Grandpa Tom?" your dad will be back soon. Uncle Tom understood and took Andrew's hand. Andrew, let's go wash our hands, then we'll give your dad a surprise. Just then, the sound of a car engine came from outside the courtyard. I breathed a sigh of relief. Help had finally arrived. My parents hurried into the courtyard. When they saw David, my mother's eyes instantly filled with tears. She rushed forward and hugged her son tightly. But the moment he saw Demi, his face darkened terribly. Who allowed you to bring this woman back? The mother quickly pulled her husband's sleeve and whispered, don't say anything. Do you want our son to run away again? David wrapped his arms tightly around Demi's waist and stood tall. Dad, Mom, I want to marry Demi. No one can stop me this time. I couldn't be bothered to listen to his grand words, and my gaze passed over them and headed for the courtyard gate. The familiar black car drove in smoothly and stopped not far away. The door opened, and a tall, steady figure stepped out. The moment she saw Gavin, she finally felt at ease. Gavin walked into the yard with steady steps, his gaze briefly resting on David, as if he were just seeing a stranger. He walked straight up to me, gently took my hand, and asked, "Where's Andrew?" David finally realized that Gavin had ignored him. He stood up straight, adopting a defiant posture, and spoke. "Brother, you're just in time. I'm officially informing you that I'm going to marry Demi." As for Bailey, he glanced at me with a condescending tone. Considering she waited for me for 5 years, she can stay at the Liu household as a maid or something. That's more than enough kindness. He paused, raised his finger toward the direction Andrew had just left, and said, "But that child named Andrew must be sent away. My child, David, can only be the child of Demi." Gavin finally looked at him straight in the eye, his expression calm but carrying an invisible pressure. He took a step forward, shielding me slightly behind him, his voice low but clear to everyone, "He's my son. Why should he leave?" Upon hearing this, David took a half step back, his eyes filled with disbelief. "This child is yours and—" "Yes, it's mine and Bailey's." Gavin took out our marriage certificate from his chest. "Take a good look." Upon hearing this, David took a half step back, his eyes filled with disbelief. "This child is yours and—" "Yes, it's mine and Bailey's." Gavin took out our marriage certificate from his chest. "Take a good look." Inside was a wedding photo of me and Gavin. David's face turned pale in an instant. "But she's clearly my wife." David muttered to himself. "Please show some respect." "She is now my wife, the legitimate wife of Gavin," Gavin said coldly. At that moment, Andrew ran over. Gavin ignored David's reaction, put away the marriage certificate, then bent down to pick up Andrew and asked softly, "What did you draw today, little artist?" "I drew the ocean and little fish." Andrew excitedly hugged Gavin's neck and said in a babyish voice, "Dad, I want to see your new design." This heartwarming father-son interaction made David's face turn even paler. "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." David suddenly took a step forward. "Bailey, how could you forget our feelings so quickly? Can the love between us just be forgotten like that?" His voice was choked with emotion and pleading. "5 years ago, you swore you would love only me." Gavin gave a cold laugh. "Is that so? Just like you swore on your wedding day that you would take care of her for the rest of your life, and then turned around and left with another woman? What right do you have to talk about love? You don't even know what love is." David's face turned pale, and he was about to argue, but his father's voice rang out from beside him. "Enough, David." He glared sternly at his younger son. "When you abandoned Bailey, did you ever think about how she would feel? Over the past 5 years, Gavin has been by her side through the toughest times. What right do you have to come back now and blame others? Gavin and Bailey's marriage has the blessing of both me and your mother. You must respect that." His mother stepped forward and gently patted David on the shoulder. "Son, some things are lost forever. You should look forward." David stared blankly at Andrew in Gavin's arms, the clear sound of Dad still ringing in his ears. He couldn't accept this reality. How could Bailey, who had once belonged only to him, become his brother's wife and have such a big child? Demi, standing nearby, quickly sensed the sudden change in atmosphere. She suddenly clutched her chest and turned pale. David, I feel a little unwell. David was immediately distracted and hurried over to support her. Demi, what's wrong? Let's go to the hospital. He picked Demi up and hurried out. As he passed by me, he paused, his gaze lingering on my face with a look of reluctance. Bailey, this isn't over. He lowered his voice, dropped that line, and left the Liu family villa quickly, hugging Demi and not looking back. 3 days later, in the afternoon, I was in my study organizing design drafts when the doorbell suddenly rang. I opened the door and saw David. He hadn't seen me for a few days and looked like he had lost weight, with bloodshot eyes. Bailey, can we talk? I hesitated for a moment, but finally let him in and led him to the living room. His gaze swept across the living room and finally settled on the family photo on the wall, his Adam's apple moving slightly. In the photo, Andrew is being held in Gavin's arms, and I am snuggled up beside them, smiling happily. These past 5 years. He begins, his voice dry, I haven't gone a single day without thinking about you. I picked up the warm water by my side, didn't respond, and just watched him perform. Back then, I left you because I had no choice. Demi threatened that if I didn't accompany her, she would kill herself. I sneered, so you abandoned me on our wedding day, in front of all the guests? David lowered his head, his voice pleading, but my feelings for you are real. Bailey, give me one more chance, just one. I can give you and the kids the best life, better than what my brother can give you. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the green plants in the courtyard bathed in the afternoon sun. David, my life now is good. I turned around and calmly met his gaze. You can't give me what I want. You couldn't 5 years ago, and you certainly can't now. As I watched his shoulders slump, I continued, I love Gavin. He gave me respect, stability, and a real home. You'll never understand that. David's face turned pale instantly, and just as he was about to speak, the doorbell suddenly rang. I opened the door, and Demi was standing there. She didn't wait for me to respond, but pushed the door open and walked in. When she saw David, her expression immediately turned gloomy. So, David, I've been looking for you all day, and you've been hiding here after all. Demi turned to me, her eyes filled with hostility. Bailey, you really are relentless. You're already married to Gavin, and now you're trying to seduce my David? I looked at her calmly. Demi, watch your language. This is my home, and I have the right to ask you to leave. Leave? She laughed sharply. Who do you think you are? Gavin married you out of pity. Who knows how much he despises you inside? Is that so? A cold voice came from the doorway. Gavin had appeared there at some point, his face dark. He strode in, walked past me, and before Demi could react, he slapped her hard across the face with a loud smack. Demi stumbled back, covering her face, staring at him in disbelief, her eyes filled with fear. Get out. Gavin's voice was as cold as ice. Demi, this is your final warning. If I ever hear you slander Bailey again, I'll make you pay for it. Demi was furious and dragged David out of the door, glaring at me viciously as she left. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. You think you won? Just wait and see, I'll make sure everyone knows about your sordid past. The next morning, my phone kept buzzing. When I checked it, social media was ablaze. A post titled, The True Face of a Rich Family's Wife, from mistress to wife, was being shared like crazy, filled with all sorts of slander against me. The post claimed that I had been having an affair with Gavin for a long time, that I had deliberately approached David, and even implied that Andrew was not Gavin's child. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. These malicious rumors had already begun to affect my work, and several important clients called to say they wanted to suspend our cooperation. Years of hard work seemed to be ruined in an instant. After seeing this, Gavin immediately contacted the PR team and lawyers to start gathering evidence to prepare for a lawsuit. Don't worry, I've already had someone track down the source of this post. 3 days later, the technical team confirmed that the IP address of the post came from the hotel where Demi was staying, and the evidence was conclusive. At the same time, the person Gavin sent to verify Demi's medical records also made a shocking discovery. The doctor in charge of Demi, after repeatedly checking the records and the latest test reports, was shocked to say that her physical examination report was normal and she had never suffered from any illness. Her so-called terminal illness was completely fabricated. A 5-year scam. Gavin laid the evidence before David. He almost immediately drove to the hotel where Demi was staying. "You've been lying to me for 5 years?" David burst into the room, his face ashen, and grabbed Demi by the neck. "You're not sick, are you? Answer me." Demi initially tried to argue, but faced with the irrefutable medical report, she finally revealed her true colors. "So what?" she sneered. "I'm not faking it. Will you give up that woman Bailey and marry me at the wedding?" David shook his head in agony. "I gave up everything for you, abandoned the person who truly loved me. It was all a carefully orchestrated deception?" Demi sneered. "Don't pretend, David. You know why I came back. It's because I'm almost out of money and I need you to keep supplying me." David staggered a few steps, the last trace of tenderness in his eyes vanishing completely. He roared furiously, "Get out! Get out! All of you, get out!" That evening, David sat alone in the corner of the bar, downing one shot after another. Flashes of regret and folly from the past 5 years kept replaying in his mind. In the early hours of the morning, David sent a drunken message on Facebook. "Bailey, I was wrong, completely wrong. I shouldn't have let you go. Give me a chance to come back to you." The accompanying photo is a group photo from our university days, when we were still young and innocent, full of dreams for the future. This Facebook post quickly went viral, with many media outlets screenshotting and reporting on it, and the topic "publicly confessing to my older sister-in-law" trended on social media. I was embarrassed when I saw the news and immediately contacted David to ask him to delete it, but no one answered the phone. When Gavin saw the news, he didn't show any emotion, but the atmosphere around him was so tense it was scary. During those days, he seemed like a different person. He spoke very little and spent less time at home. Often, I would go to bed before he returned, and when I woke up, he had already left. At the dinner table, it was just Andrew and me, and the atmosphere was quiet and somewhat oppressive. A week later, David's newly opened company suddenly received a notice ordering it to suspend operations and undergo rectification due to alleged commercial infringement. Even David, who was usually slow on the uptake, immediately realized who was behind this. He charged into the group headquarters building like an enraged lion, crashing his way through to the top floor and the president's office. "Gavin! You've gone too far. Who do you think you are to shut down my company?" Gavin calmly put down the documents in his hand. "It's just business competition. Your company has infringed on our patent rights. We're just following the rules." "Bullshit." David slammed his hand on the table and stood up. "You're just getting back at me for what I posted." The two brothers' argument grew more and more intense, and they were about to come to blows when their father arrived just in time to stop the fight. "Enough!" his father shouted angrily. "Do you even act like brothers?" He turned to David. "You're 30 years old, not 3. Can you use your brain when you do things? Do you know how much trouble your Facebook post caused Bailey and Gavin? Do you think we didn't embarrass you enough?" David lowered his head and said nothing. That evening, Gavin returned home and, unusually, had been drinking. His eyes were filled with a vulnerability and unease I had never seen before. "Bailey," he said suddenly, his voice low and hoarse, "I'm afraid of losing you." I was stunned, not knowing what to say. He continued, seeing David's Facebook, "I couldn't help but think of our past. I'm afraid that you'll regret choosing me." I hugged him tightly. "You fool, what are you talking about? The person I've always loved is you, and you will always be the only one for me. The past is in the past. The next day, the Liu family held an emergency family meeting and ultimately decided to transfer David to the U.S. branch, publicly claiming that it was to expand overseas markets and entrust him with important responsibilities. The real intention was to get him out of this place of controversy and avoid further complications. David unexpectedly did not object this time. Perhaps he also realized that staying here would only cause everyone pain. I thought life had settled down. It was an early autumn morning, the sun was shining brightly, and I was taking Andrew to kindergarten when I saw a familiar figure lurking suspiciously at the school gate from a distance. The person was wearing large sunglasses and a hat, seemingly trying to conceal their identity, but their deliberate posture only drew more attention. It was Demi. I immediately became alert, gripped Andrew's hand tightly, and quickly dialed the number of the bodyguard Gavin had arranged. Demi seemed to sense my alertness, gave a sinister smile, and slowly walked toward us. "Long time no see, Bailey." She took off her sunglasses, her eyes bloodshot and her face sallow, looking extremely unwell. I shielded Andrew behind me. "Demi, please stay away from us, or I'll call the police." "Call the police?" She smiled crookedly. "You took everything that belonged to me, and now you want to call the police to arrest me?" She suddenly reached out to grab Andrew. "Come on, kid, come with Auntie. Auntie will take you to a nice place." Andrew was so scared by her terrifying expression that he started crying loudly, clinging tightly to my legs and hiding behind me. I stood in front of the child and shouted sternly, "Are you crazy? Don't touch my child." A flash of madness crossed Demi's eyes. "David abandoned me, Gavin hit me, and it's all because of you, Bailey. I want you to taste the pain of losing someone you love most." She suddenly lunged toward us, trying to forcefully grab Andrew. At the last possible moment, a figure rushed forward with lightning speed, kicking Demi in the leg and knocking her to the ground. It was Gavin who arranged for the bodyguard to secretly protect Andrew. Seeing the dangerous situation, he immediately intervened to stop Demi's reckless behavior. Andrew was so scared that he started crying. I held him tightly and kept reassuring him, "It's okay, sweetie. Mom is here. No one can hurt you." The security guards quickly subdued Demi, and the police arrived shortly afterward, taking her away for questioning. Upon hearing the news, Gavin rushed over, his face ashen. He tightly embraced Andrew and me. "I'm sorry, it was my negligence." The subsequent police investigation was even more chilling. Demi not only planned this kidnapping, but also prepared a series of even more vicious revenge plans and spread more rumors about me. The police found detailed plans and reconnaissance photos on her phone, which are solid evidence. In the end, Demi was sentenced to prison for attempted kidnapping and defamation. After the case was closed, David came to our house on the eve of his departure for abroad. He stood at the door, not coming in, looking at me with a complicated expression. Gone were the previous stubbornness and resentment, replaced by deep apology and relief. "I'm sorry, Bailey." His voice was low but firm. "I apologize for all my selfishness and recklessness in the past. I was a jerk, and I hurt you and myself." He turned to Gavin, his tone sincere. "Brother, thank you for always taking care of Bailey, and thank you for forgiving me. I wish you both happiness forever." Before leaving, David crouched down, touched Andrew's head, and showed a rare look of tenderness on his face. "Little guy, take good care of your mom and dad, and grow up healthy and happy." Watching his figure gradually fade into the distance, I felt a sense of relief unlike any I had ever experienced before. The shadows of the past had finally dissipated completely, and life had finally returned to its peaceful and tranquil state. Time flies, and another year has passed in the blink of an eye. Over the past year, the turmoil has gradually subsided, and life has returned to normal. David went to the United States, and Demi received the punishment she deserved. The dark clouds that once hung over us seem to have been completely swept away. Andrew is in kindergarten, and every day he brings home all kinds of cute, childish drawings. Today is a special day. It's Gavin and my 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years already. I sighed as I looked at the calendar in the morning. Gavin hugged me from behind, resting his chin on top of my head. Yes, 5 years, my dear. To celebrate, we decided to revisit the seaside town where we had our first date, this time with Andrew. 3 hours later, we stood on that familiar beach, the sea breeze gently caressing us, and the sun shining warmly on our family of 3. Andrew ran excitedly along the sand, picking up seashells and chasing seagulls, his face radiating with a pure, innocent smile. At dinner, I was at the seaside restaurant I had booked, and I ordered the exact same menu as 5 years ago. Do you remember? This is where we had our first date 5 years ago. I waved my red wine glass and clinked it lightly against his. Gavin's eyes sparkled with tenderness. Of course I remember. You were wearing a blue dress, and your hair was tousled by the sea breeze. I was surprised by the details of his memory. I didn't expect you to remember so clearly. I remember everything about you. He held my hand, his eyes filled with deep affection. Under the moonlight, we walked along the beach, Andrew already playing in the hotel's children's playground, leaving just the 2 of us. Gavin, thank you for your love and companionship over the years. I stopped in my tracks and looked him earnestly in the eyes. You have given me a complete and happy home. He gently pulled me into his arms. Actually, I never told you, but I've liked you since college. Hearing this shocking confession, I stood there stunned. What? We didn't even know each other back then. Do you remember the campus singing contest in our sophomore year? On the night of the finals, you were wearing a white dress, singing quietly. There were so many people in the audience, so noisy, but your voice suddenly pierced my heart. But you were already with David at that time, and I didn't want to ruin your relationship, so I never confessed my feelings. I looked at him in disbelief. So on the day of the wedding, you showed up at the banquet hall. Well, I just wanted to quietly wish you well, but I didn't expect that to happen. He paused. But I have to admit, when I saw you so sad, part of me was relieved because it gave me a chance to get closer to you. The sea breeze blew, bringing a slight chill. But I felt a burning sensation in my chest. All the hurt and pain of the past seemed to be gently soothed away in that moment. After returning to the hotel, we took Andrew back to his room and watched him sleep peacefully. Gavin and I smiled at each other. This was our greatest happiness. The next morning at breakfast, Gavin received a message from Andrew's teacher saying that his drawing had won first prize in a citywide competition. Looks like our little artist is going to be famous, Gavin said proudly, patting his son on the head. In the sunshine, Gavin led Andrew toward me, one big and one small, their shadows stretched out long behind them. Their smiles were pure and bright, even brighter than the sunshine outside the window. I know this is my happiness, the most genuine and secure happiness that I hold tightly in my hands after weathering storms and hardships.